I struggled to know what to preach on this week, and not because the readings were so different, but because they're all so much the same. I think that it's fair to say that the first reading and the gospel really are just two sides of the same story, and we might not pick up on that. And ultimately, the second reading really is just explaining how those two are the same thing. Thank you. So I thought that's maybe what we would talk about today. So we have in our readings today, we have a talk of the first creation of the world, when God first tried to take the world, and we have the story of the recreation of the world, when God tried to take the world again. So if we just look at the first creation of the world, by the way, you also might want to get your missalettes out because I'm going to ask you some questions, and it's all going to come straight from the reading. So maybe you know them very well, and you'll just be all right. But in the first creation of the world, who comes first? Which of the people are created first? Okay, the man. The man is created first. And what is the man made out of? Clay. Very good. What ultimately is clay? Clay is ultimately dust that's mixed with water to make a more solid substance. What did we do on Ash Wednesday? We put ashes on everyone's forehead. You knew that one. I know you did. And actually, we sprinkle it with holy water and almost make a paste out of it. That's how we're able to get that cross on your head. So we use a type of clay on Ash Wednesday. And the deacon and myself said very simple words. It says, remember that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. Right? So Adam, who's made out of the dust of the earth, we're reminding ourselves that, yes, Adam was made out of dust, and at some point we will return to dust. And then we have the recreation of the world. Jesus, who comes from, who's born of man, of a woman. And when we think of the two most pivotal parts of the story, when Jesus is born and when Jesus resurrects the whole world, as you remember, we talked about this for Christmas. He wasn't born in this like stable thing that was built out of wood and looks really cute and has a light in there. It was in a cave. So Jesus was born in the earth. And then when he dies, they lay him in a tomb right off where he was crucified, back into the earth. So the first man in the first creation of the world comes from the earth, and the second man in the recreation of the world also comes from the earth. At the first creation of the world, God takes that clay and forms into a body, and then he breathes life into that person. Right? So there's something physical there, and there's something spiritual there. And he breathes life into Adam, into the first man, and life begins. And ultimately sin comes into the world. At the recreation of the world, Jesus breathes his last, and redemption enters the world. So we have the first creation of the world and the recreation of the world. Where in the first creation of the world, where did it all take place? In the garden, okay. It takes place in the garden. Sin enters the world in a garden. In the recreation of the world, actually, if you read the book of John's Gospel, after Jesus is dead and they take him down off the cross, it says they place him in a tomb that's in a garden. So right off the site right there, there just happened to be a small garden that was there, and they placed him in a tomb that was surrounded by a garden. Now, in the first creation of the world, it tells us that, it says, then the Lord God planted a garden in Eden, and it gives a direction. What direction was it in? In the east. Very good, okay. So the east always represents the rising sun and new life. Adam and Eve eventually have a couple of kids, and they kind of have a little bit of sibling rivalry, and one ends up dead. And God then sends Cain off to be recreated. What direction does he send Cain off to? The east. Okay, very good. Just so you know, I'm going to use the east a couple of times here. He sends him off to the east to be redeemed. Now, we kind of fast forward. There's a couple other times at the east that we could talk about, where we fast forward a little bit to the very beginning of the Gospels. Jesus is born, and the Magi come bearing gifts. Now, they're pagan worshipers coming to meet the living God. What direction do they come from? They came from the east, right? They came from redemption, and something changes within them, and they go back different. I don't know if you know this, but as Jesus enters Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, we'll celebrate in a few weeks, it's always called the East Gate of Jerusalem. And it's also where there's a big grave site around there because from all of the Old Testament prophets, they talked of the Messiah entering the promised land from what direction? The east. Very good. So Jesus enters into Jerusalem right before he suffers and dies from the east. For 1964 years, Father would always face one specific direction when he said Mass. What direction is that? Okay, before 1964, what direction did Father face? Towards the what? The rising sun. That was not a very good one. That was my fault. So he'd face the rising sun as he's saying Mass, praying for the redemption of his people. Now I face the darkness. Whatever. We can talk about that later on. Right? So from time began, there was something about the specific direction that prayer happened. So in the first creation of the world, we have man, and in the recreation of the world, we have a man. We have Adam, and we have Christ. Now let's just take a little bit further step. In the first creation of the world, we have man first, and from man comes woman. What body part does God take from Adam? His rib. They take his rib out, and they form a woman, right? So we could say it's his bride from his side. That's also where we get the idea of the wife being the better half of a man, because let's be honest, guys, it's totally true, okay? And you better shake your head yes right now. So from his side, that happens. What was Adam doing when that happened? He was sleeping. He was passed out. It must have been a pretty good sleep, too, to take a whole rib out and you not notice. So he takes the rib out and makes a new human being for Adam to pour his life into. In the recreation of the world, Jesus comes from a woman. Man comes from woman. But we take a further step in that idea. While Jesus is on the cross, he's pierced somewhere. Where's he pierced? In his side. And what comes out? Blood and water. Okay, and the early church fathers saw that as the church itself pouring forth from his side. So his bride, the church, comes from his side. What was Jesus doing when that happened? He was dead. He was asleep on the cross. So as the bride is brought forth from Adam's side, he's asleep. As the bride of God himself comes out from his side, he's dead. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been baptized. Raise your hand if you're baptized. Okay, good. Me too. We're the bride of Christ. Right? We come forth from the side of Christ as he's suffering and dying for us. That's how much he loves us. So, in the first creation of the world, we have a man and a woman. In the recreation of the world, we have a man and a woman. Let's just go a little bit further. In the first creation of the world, we have a man, a woman, and an angel. But that angel is fallen. His name is Satan or Lucifer. They depict him as a serpent. And that angel tempts the woman to either do God's will or not do God's will. And that woman says yes to not doing God's will. And because of that, sin enters the world. In the recreation of the world, we have a man, a woman, and an angel, except this angel is not fallen. It's the angel Gabriel. And this angel tempts the woman to either do God's will or not do God's will. And the woman says yes to doing God's will. And because of that, redemption enters the world. Now, just as a quick side point, I think it's sad in the church, in our current culture, that we think of angels as just these like fairy tale things. Each of you has a guardian angel, and I highly encourage you to grow in a relationship with that guardian angel. The guardian angel has been with you for all your life, looking out for you, interceding on your behalf before Almighty God. Let's continue. In the first creation of the world, we have a man, a woman, and an angel. We also have What do they get the fruit off of in the first creation of the world? A tree. So we have a man, a woman, an angel, and a tree. And from that tree is fruit. And the woman chooses that fruit, and sin and disobedience enter the world. So she picks fruits, and sin happens. In the recreation of the world, we have a man, a woman, an angel, and I guess we don't really have a tree. He's hanging on a cross made out of wood, which is made out of a... Okay, so we have a man, a woman, an angel, and a tree in the recreation of the world. And the greatest of all fruit is hanging on that. And simply by you and I choosing that fruit, redemption begins to enter into our lives. Now, in the first creation of the world, Adam and Eve, it tells us in the first reading that they realize they're naked after they've sinned. Right? Adam, who is in charge of naming all of the animals, his job was to give purpose to all those things, to have dominion over all these things. Then God, as Adam is asleep, takes his very flesh and bones to make someone that's his equal helpmate. And for the very first time, a naked man sees a naked woman. And he knows it's his job to name that woman. And so looking upon bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, he says, whoa, man, okay? And he names the woman. And after that woman then falls to sin, she takes on the name of Eve. I know that we think of Jesus always having a loincloth on. That's a largely Protestant view of the cross. There is absolutely no way Romans would have cared enough about a simple Jew to care that he wouldn't want to be seen naked in front of his family or the whole city. Jesus was absolutely crucified naked. So when sin enters the world, man and woman are naked. And when redemption enters the world, God is bearing everything, not holding anything back. On Ash Wednesday, we said, remember that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. You and I are not made to live for eternity here on earth, but we are made to live for eternity. And God doesn't want to just leave you alone to deal with all those things. He knows that sin is in the world. And He wants to give us the grace to turn away from those things. In other words, to be redeemed. From the first creation of the world to the recreation of the world, we see very clearly that God has a plan and that He's not willing to give up on His creation, on those that He loves the most. This Lenten season, don't forget that. God has a plan for your life. Whatever the filth is, whatever the sin that's going on, whatever the struggles, whatever the discouragements, whatever those things are, the temptations, Jesus wants to be in that with you. He wants to redeem you from them. He wants that not to be the end of the story. He wants to refresh you and make you new again. Have a powerful Lent.